Hi, Tim here with another segment from the NC State Chess Team series on opening theory. Today we're going to talk about a type of game associated with closed games, that is, one in which white plays d4 and black responds with d5. This particular game within the closed games is known as the semi-Slav, and we're going to focus in on a specific variant known as the Botvinnik variation. This variation is named after the last name of world champion Mikhail Botvinnik, who held the title from 1948 to 1963, with a couple of brief spells of losing it for a year to uh, Vasily Smyslov, Mikhail Tal, and Tigran Petrosian, respectively. Now, as far as how it gets played in Grandmaster matches, it was probably one of the most topical and heavily played games back in the 90s, but has since forth been relegated somewhat to the sidelines when it comes to queen pawn games, largely because it was so topical and analyzed that uh, with all the preparation that existed, it was mainly found to result in topical and sharp perpetual draws, assuming people, looked at the preparation. However, it is a very useful opening to look at for lower expert and lower master type of players because it does require a lot of skill, but at the same time it can lead to a lot of, decisive results leading to wins for you on either side if you're playing against an unprepared opponent. So we're going to go ahead and start looking at it, and I'm going to go give an idea throughout about why moves are being done for these mainline structures of this variation. So again, this opening can be reached through a variety of different transpositions, but we're going to play it like classical Queen's Gambit decline. Except here on move 3, I'm going to move NF3 instead of NC3 just to make sure that Indian games wouldn't be played essentially. Okay, and now we play C6, and here we reach the semi-Slav. Now normally, the main line of semi-Slav would be you move E3. However, we're going to start by moving BG5, and this leads to first phase of what could be a Botvinnik variation. Now, in general, this is just a pretty solid move. Now that you have the bishop out, you could move E3 if you were so inclined, and the nice thing is you don't have to worry about, the bishop being holed in on C1, and it is putting some pressure along here. Now, of course, black can respond with something like H6 or BE7, but the most testing, if not most principled variation, is in fact going with the Botvinnik, which ultimately black does control by capturing the pawn with d times c4. At this point, while white does have the option of making a move like e3, since the pawn's already been exchanged and black is willing to make every attempt to keep it, it now makes sense to go for the full-fledged Botvinnik variation, in which you move e4, creating this, ideal pawn center structure with the quick development of a central thrust attack. And right now, the immediate threat is obviously taking um, that pawn back on the c file with your bishop. Now, black, of course, will respond with b5 to this to retain the pawn because essentially that pawn was taken in the first place uh, just to gain a material advantage. The simple fact that now his pawn structure is a little off kilter, a little off sides. So as a result, now logically following this ideal pawn center, white will move e5. Now, a quick evaluation of this would suggest, well, isn't white just winning since he's got that pin and the knight's going to have to be exchanged off now for the pawn? No. The reason why for this is h6. Now white is forced to move his bishop down to bh4, and now g5. Again, another quick evaluation would suggest, well, now isn't black winning since white is kind of being pressed to move his bishop down, and since there's not really a pin anymore, black can just move his knight out of the situation and just be a pawn up and have, in some ways, a better pawn structure? Again, no, because now white will exchange with his knight. And at this point, black is sort of pressed to take, because if he doesn't immediately take, it can lead to a weaker position. At this point, it's best to just take the material and get as much as you can out of it. So it leads to exchange, and here we are back again with this bishop putting the pin on the knight, except now black is technically the piece up. However, that will be very short-lived. So with that assessment, we currently have a situation where white has 7 pawns to black's 6, 2 of which are on a doubled c-pawn structure. So again, one has to wonder, well, isn't white just winning at this point? If you're going by pure material count, once he takes that knight, yes, but for all intents and purposes, no, because the reality is both sides have a significant attack essentially coming forward. White, beyond that exchange that I just mentioned, is going to try getting his pieces moved up around here in the kingside and kingside castling, whereas black is going to, activate his pieces on the queen side and try queenside castling. So the game is going to become significantly trickier, and this starts with black moving NB-D7. Now, because of this, now white can only take the knight with the pawn if he actually wants to, get get the material back properly. So while white can do that now, usually that player tends to hold off for as long as possible because the pin still exists, and it makes more sense to just develop. So the easiest way to do this is, generally speaking, trying to Fion shadow your bishop and then kingside castle. So let's start with g3. And to this, because now that diagonal is open for the attack, and just to bolster up his own development for a queenside castle, black will play bb7. Consequently, white will play bg2 to counter any issues that could potentially occur along that diagonal at the moment. Now, black will play qb6, and because the pin no longer exists, white has to take back on e times f6. At this point, black now queenside castles, and white kingside castles. So again, let's look at an assessment of this position. White is still ahead by a pawn, and black still has that doubled c-pawn, but now both sides are more or less actively positioned, and both are castled in some way. Again, one would think, because of what I just mentioned, wouldn't white be ahead? If you're just going by pure material count, yes, but again, no. For the simple fact that the attacks that are coming forward are very problematic for both sides, and it's all based upon how well you've researched this opening. Now, to give an idea of what type of moves are coming, each side wants to do going forward, white really kind of wants to move this A, B pawn, and maybe move the rook over to the C file eventually, to try showing how dubious perhaps this queenside castle setup is. Meanwhile, black wants to get this bishop activated, frequently trying to exchange the bishop off, and then get his rooks over here to start up a real kingside assault. Now, the thing black will usually do in most cases before that happens is try to really remove the last defender of note on white's king side to really remove any defensive annoyances, and that happens with c5. Here we see black wanting to exchange off these light squared bishops, which without white pretty much he's an open target for that attack I just mentioned. So white clearly does not want that exchange to happen right away, if at all. So the move that, generally speaking, follows is d5. And from this point, we're going to end the analysis for now, just for the simple fact that I already mentioned the type of attacks that tend to follow, but there are multiple variations, sub-variations equated with this style, and it really is all a matter of one's preference. Hopefully, this video has shown that the Botvinnik variation is one that requires a lot of energy um, and knowledge of a structure that goes beyond immediate evaluations. And again, while it can be a useful tool against unprepared opponents, I wouldn't suggest it for players unless they feel that they have the tactical prowess and positional awareness of closed games, specifically semi-Slav based type of games, in order to play it. With that said, I hope you found this to be useful, and maybe you will use this going forward in your opening repertoire. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for another one of our series. Thanks. Bye.